Well, hello. Today I'd like to do something different. I'd like to do a first impression of a homemade pen. This is a pen made for me by a student, so yeah, a little bit of personal meaning there. So I'll dive into the story and everything. First of all, I've taught this student since he was in 8th grade. He is now a senior. He'll be graduating at the end of a week. Taught him in 8th grade Algebra 1 because, yes, I'm a science teacher, but I also teach math. And then this year he was in physics. So, yeah, he's run the full gamut of the classes I teach. I actually first knew him when he was in 7th grade. I didn't really notice him until the day I remember in lunch line, I opened up a crock pot because back then I was still eating the cafeteria food and found a sauerkraut there. And he says, "What's that?" And I said, "Sauerkraut." He says, "Oh boy," which at least around here is not a normal 7th grader reaction. So, yeah, I've known him for a long time. Lives in a rural area, and I don't want to get too identifying because that's his business. But anyway, so it's a homemade pen. So let's take a look at it. So this, of course, is the pen. Has a rather nice acrylic. What started it, we had, he said, "Hey, do you want to see my pen collection?" And, this was one of the ones I picked out. I said, "Wow, this is really nice." You can see it's got a kind of a nice acrylic. Metal cap, metal there. Magnetic closure, which is unique. And it posts magnetically. Iridium steel nib. Germany. Undo this bit. And it's a cartridge converter pen. Like I said, it's a kit pen. He turned the acrylic. The rest is from the kit. So it's not his nib, but then again, what high school kid in small town North Dakota is going to create their own nibs and feeds? So, I'll put a link to the company that made the kit down below. But what's interesting to me, he actually, this is one of his turned acrylics, but he's made pens out of antler, out of different kinds of wood, various materials he's found around the place. He started doing it back in 8th grade. And what I used to do, I don't so much anymore, but I used to teach a lot. I bought myself a $100 document camera, just a cheapie, but, school didn't provide me with one. And so I do back then a lot of my notes and, problem solutions and everything with fountain pens. And I guess he caught the bug. Actually, so did his cousin. His cousin also makes fountain pens, but hasn't given me one, although I did buy a ballpoint from him once. But anyway, I asked him, "Well, are you still making pens?" He says, "No, I'm getting kind of bored with it." And, I think that's true. And it's a little sad that he's giving that up, but when you think about it, here he's developed a skill with the lathe and with assembling. He may not be making fountain pens anymore, but it wouldn't surprise me if at some point he uses this skill in a different way. You could say, well, why doesn't he become the next Brian Gray and start North Dakota's answer to Edison pens? Well, maybe he could, but I think he has different dreams in life. But the skills he developed by learning to do this and do this well, that's what he can carry with him. So let's ink this pen up. I was looking around at my various inks trying to figure out what would fit it real well, and I just realized I grabbed the wrong one. Okay, it's still the wrong one, but the one I want isn't over there, and I don't feel like looking for it on video. So I'm going to fill this with Colorverse Interstellar Space, which is sort of a blackish green ink. Oops, and I got some on my nice desk. Can't have that. I got to keep it looking nice for a little longer. So I did 2 full fills. One thing I should mention, one of my when I showed this on Pens in Use last week, I was told that some of these end up with a rusting problem, so I'm going to be cautious that that does not happen to this pen, because I would feel bad if that happened to this pen. I don't know if this is one of the ones it would happen to, but I will be careful and perhaps not keep it inked super long. So let's call this an Ethan pen. There's enough Ethans around. I think that keeps it anonymous enough. I don't know what nib size this would be. Probably a medium or a fine. There's nothing written on it. Probably a number 5 nib, so maybe if I ever felt like it, since the nib has nothing to do with him, I could put a different nib on it. The ink in it, as I said, is Colorverse Interstellar Space. Actually, this isn't a bad match. It just, the one I had in mind was a better green. Not a particularly flexible nib. One thing I'm noticing as I hold it, these facets, I think for most people that's going to be a love-hate thing. Some people might like them, some might not. They offer more flexibility as far as the grip than the tripod grip on a Lamy Safari, but they do somewhat limit your grip. And then, of course, I'm running into the where it gets wider at the top of the section here. But anyway, the nib is not a flex nib. But what do you expect? I will say there's a bit of line variation, and it seems to have some variation in the ink too. Capable, apparently, of being a very wet pen, or a little bit drier. Giving a little more pressure does not seem to particularly increase the flex, but it seems to increase the flow. And it has no trouble keeping up there. The smear test. Yeah, that's wet. Let's try no pressure. Actually, very not wet, so that's interesting. Reverse writing. It seems to be a lot more comfortable just holding it like this. Actually, very smooth, but god-awful. And finally, the world-famous Per Gustafsson test. Not stellar, but again, it's a kit pen. That's the kit nib. The real point of a kit pen is to give pen makers a chance to experiment a bit with the acrylics and some of the other things. So that's my first impressions of the Ethan pen. A pleasant enough writing experience. I really like how well finished the acrylic is. You can tell that a lot of time was spent to make that smooth, glassy smooth, and very, get rid of all those little things that happen. So obviously some skill with the lathe and whatever else is involved. Well put together. I'm pleased with this pen, and I will enjoy using it. And, when I mentioned on my Friday's Pens in Use about pens with personal meaning, now I have another one with some personal meaning, because when I look at this one, I'll always remember who gave it to me. One test I always like to do with these fountain pens is the pocket test. Now this is kind of a weird shirt with a weird sideways pocket, and yet it goes on perfectly easily. So I think it passed the pocket test. So that's my first impressions of an Ethan pen. He may not be going into pen making for his future plans in life, but I'm hoping that his skill with his hands and the other skills he learned by doing this for so many years will serve him well in the future with the next stage of his life, because graduating and new things are coming. So, I want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.